Welcome to episode 117. How are you?
Oh, that's such a loaded question today. I am going to
Yes.
say I am well because I am here and in community and in connection. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
been a big week. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, it has. It's been really interesting. The last week, was it as the time goes by so fast. Last week, the week before last, my birthday, right? With me
Right?
losing my wallet the day before, it was crazy. So, we've been like catching up on projects and phone calls and going through all the details of all the different parts of life, I feel like. Yeah. Yeah. But, today we're
Right.
talking about intellectual wellness. And when I think about difficult times and perspectives, it really is the opportunity to go outside. I've had to get some sun, get some fresh air, right? Look at the trees, look at the birds, and just remember that even though it's kind of gray outside today, they're still taken care of. And it's okay. And I have what I need in this moment. So I've been like, bringing myself back there over and over again.
I love that. I
Yeah.
saw, where was I today? I can't remember what social media. I was doing a little bit of
Mhm.
social media and I saw a poem. And
Mhm.
if I can pull it up, I will share it with you because it was so beautiful about tough times.
Yeah.
And it was, hang on just a second, and I'm going to
Okay.
see if I can pull it up. I marked it because I was like, wow, that was good. Let me see if it'll come up. It was basically just what you're talking about. It was talking about, going to nature
Mhm.
when things are tough and going. I'm not gonna be able to find it this quick,
That's
but
okay.
I might when we bring our guest up.
Yeah,
But
let's
yeah, it was
see.
basically about going to the earth and going
Mhm.
to nature when times are really tough. And, I have to confess I haven't gotten to do that today. So when we're done tonight, I may go and, put my feet in the grass somewhere.
Yeah.
Should we do introductions, my friend, and kick this party off?
Yes, let's do it. Let's do it. Hi, ladies. I'm Shannon Mitchell, a Black millennial entrepreneur and author, the founder of Shalo Glow, an all natural handmade personal products company that helps people with dry skin glow from head to toe. I am your champion for self care, business care, and intentional wellness.
Hi, y'all. I am Christine Gautreaux, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, coach, Amazon best-selling author, and dancing social worker who helps you upgrade yourself and community care.
Together, we are a podcast rooted in the 8 dimensions of wellness and the co founders of Women Connected in Wisdom Community.
And we like to get together every week and have intentional conversations between ourselves and
Yeah.
expert guests on how to be wise in business, relationships, and wellness. It's a lot. So, how do we do it?
So much, right? Especially when stuff keeps changing. Like in the last few years, my schedule and what's required has changed so much it's like double dutching. I was reading one of the author's chapters for volume two. She was talking about double dutching. And that's what I feel like I've been doing as things have been changing.
Right? I was never good at double dutching.
No, not yet. I want to
My
do it.
my spatial relationships,
Yeah.
like,
Mm.
I'm a good hopscotcher.
Okay.
Like, I can hopscotch, I
Yeah.
can, I
Yeah.
when I was in track, so I grew
Mm.
up doing athletics and track and field,
Yeah.
and I did the long jump, I did the triple jump,
Hmm.
and I did the discus. So,
Hmm.
like, I have some of those skills,
Yeah.
but I think I've always been intimidated by the double dutch by
Mm.
getting whacked.
It's a thing. The jump rope whack is like unmatched. Yeah.
Right?
It's a thing.
I remember when I was in track and field, my coach wanted me to, because I was tall. I was like
Mhm.
tall and lanky when I
Yeah,
was a kid, and I was
yeah.
taller than most of the kids. So they wanted me to do the pole vault,
Mhm.
and they wanted me to do the high jump.
So that's not what you were talking about, the thing with the thing and it sticks in the ground and you
Yeah,
jump over,
no,
that's not what
no,
you were doing. What were you
no.
doing?
So the long jump is where you run and you hit, and on the bottom there's a
Okay.
line that you
Yes.
just launch
You
from
hit.
there. Like yeah, it's all flat, but you're
Got
not
you.
hitting anything. Because my coach also wanted me to do the hurdle. I
Mhm.
anything that I hit something,
Yeah.
I do not like pain. I
Mm-mm.
am not one
I
of
hear
those
you.
people. Like, I'm like, so if I could whack myself, if I could hurt I'm like, no, thank you. Like,
Yeah, I hear you. And that's what I think about with the hurdles, like, okay, you're over, and what about when you're
right?
not? Yeah.
Right? No. What about when you're clumsy? Yeah.
And I'm the most graceful and clumsy person. That's why I need the shea butter. Like, how do I keep running
Right?
into inanimate objects? I
Right?
have no idea.
Yeah, it's a thing, right? So today, what are we talking about today?
Ooh, intellectual wellness.
Ooh, can I give you that definition of
I would
intellectual
love to.
wellness?
Yeah, let's go through it.
Yeah, so intellectual wellness includes having access to different sources of information and developing critical thinking and timely decision making skills.
Mm,
Also, continually learning through intentional
mhm,
intellectual growth, situations, and artistic creativity can help maintain one's intellectual capacity.
mhm.
I have to say, before we introduce our guest, when I think
Yes.
about this definition of intellectual wellness, I think I talked last week or the week before on the show about my great aunt Betty passing.
Yes.
I was just at her funeral on Saturday, her celebration of life, and
Yes.
I think about intellectual wellness when I think about Aunt Betty.
Mm,
So she was a teacher. She was a lifelong teacher, and she taught teachers how to teach. So
mhm.
she was kind of like a train the trainers.
Yeah.
And she also taught English as a second language,
Mm,
and she believed in writing. So when we were there this weekend, she had a
yeah.
book. It was a leather bound book that was about this thick, Shannon. And I thought about you too because of how
Yeah.
you love to write and our books that we've written together. And
Yes.
she wrote the history of the family, but then she wrote her personal narrative about
Mm,
what was going on in her life and how she dealt with things.
mm,
And I knew that she was a writer, but one of the things I just didn't know how prolific she was and
mm.
how comforting it was to read her words like after she was gone and the
I hear you.
message she left us with.
Yeah.
But even when I think about that definition of intellectual wellness, I think about family reunions
Mhm.
because she would be the aunt that would show up at family reunions and she'd bring crossword puzzles for us.
Mm.
This was back before it was easy to do. Now you've got apps and things that'll do them, but this was back when
Right.
she had to create them. And she would do
Mm.
like a family crossword puzzle for us or a family word search for
I
us
like
that
that.
had
Ooh.
information about our history, but it kept our brains clicking too, right? That's what
Mm.
so when I think about intellectual wellness, I think she epitomized that. I was like,
Mm.
right?
I love the stories that you shared, right? And shout out to Aunt Betty. I like that idea for the word searches and
Hmm.
the crossword puzzles. And of course, holding space for you and your family as you celebrate her life, like you say. But what I love about the I'll say, and what I love about the stories of the women in your families is that there's a lot of that, right? There's a lot of
Oh yeah.
she went and did a computer class, she did this, she did that,
Hmm.
and I love that you get to pull from so many of those stories, and that
Right.
they had fun bringing stuff to you when you were in Texas growing up.
Right?
Yeah.
It's how I turned out who I am. Like my
Hmm.
aunts and my mom, like I just come from a family of strong women who believed in intellectual wellness and
Right.
were lifelong learners. Like
Yeah.
they're like, I mean, Aunt Betty was 91. And I
Mm.
think I told you this when I had visited her. She wanted a copy of the book, and I brought her a copy of the book. She
Yeah.
read the whole thing. Like by the time I made it
Mm.
back to come talk to her, she's like, "Oh yeah, I already read it. I
What did she
passed it along."
say?
She loved it. She was like, "I
Mm.
love the stories. I loved getting to know you as an adult better." And
Mm.
she's like, "And I passed it on to Maida because she needs to read it too," which is her
Yeah.
daughter-in-law. It was so
Mm.
cute. But I mean, I'm like, "Go Aunt Betty!" Like she
Yeah.
was like, "What?" It was
Fire.
perfect. Yeah.
Mm. That's beautiful. I
What
love
do you
that. And
think
that's
about when you think about intellectual wellness?
I do think about family. I think about the gaps that I feel like I had, right? Like we talk about the women in your family and these things that they had. And I think about how I would think about my family, think about my mom and where they were.
Mhm.
Part of the reason this May was difficult, again, turned 30. My mom's not here. Well, she's here in the urn right here, beside us. And
Mhm.
she's been here I take her out at different times. So Mother's Day, I always take her out. Um, but just thinking about that and sitting with it, overall I was pretty good. But it's interesting now having the retail space on Auburn Avenue and being right, like I literally walking distance from where she lived, and she's not here. So
Mhm.
that is the motivation behind Women Connected in Wisdom. That is the motivation behind Shalo Glow, and us having the pieces that we need to take care of ourselves intentionally at different times, and having the connections that we know we can call and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or 20 years ago, I made the same mistake. Let me tell you how I'm set up now so you can be ahead of the game. That's what
Right.
I've been building for myself because I knew I needed it and needed to fill in the gaps. Again, and it's interesting. When I was reading the book, Volume One, and listening to the audiobook, I realized that I did not include my story. If you read it, the
Ah.
majority of my chapter is actually the resource, right? And
Mhm.
I think part of that was because I was still at work and dealing with all the time and everything,
Mhm.
right? But also because I knew that it was going to be published on my mom's birthday. And because
Mm.
I felt like I had to choose the conversation and be wise about what I was talking about, I think I over edited and edited it out. And so
Mm.
I think about including yourself in the things that you're learning and the things that you're putting effort towards, right? And then I think about being mindful of what you need intentionally right now and where do you go to get those.
Right.
And that's why I love Women Connected and the experts we have.
Well, can I tell you that's one of the reasons I am so excited about our expert today
Me too.
because it could not be more timely for my
Right?
life, especially.
Yeah.
Because our listeners know I've been on a caregiving journey the last
Yes.
6 months, especially. And so, do you want to introduce our guest, Shannon? And let's go ahead and
Absolutely.
bring her up for this
Yes.
conversation.
Oh, I would love to. So, Dr. Delia Chiaramonte, excuse me. Let's see. Let me start over and make sure I pronounce her name right because I'm going to get it right for you, Dr. Chiaramonte. Okay. Dr. Delia Chiaramonte is an integrative palliative medicine physician who specializes in whole person care for families facing serious illness, using all the tools that work. She is the founder of the Integrative Palliative Institute and host of the Integrative Palliative podcast. She has published textbook chapters on integrative pain management and is currently writing a book tentatively titled Calming the Chaos: A Heart-Centered Guide for Families Coping with Illness. She was voted as a top doctor in Baltimore in 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. Please help us welcome Dr. Delia Chiaramonte. I'm going to get it right for you, Dr.
You did it perfectly. You were great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. We are so delighted that you're joining us on Women Connected in Wisdom. So, before we get started, I think the very first question I want to ask is, will you define palliative care for our listeners to make sure we're all clear from the start of the conversation?
I love that question so much because there is widespread confusion, even among physicians, about what palliative care is. People make the mistake, so this is not what it is. People are making the mistake thinking that palliative care is the same as end of life care or the same as hospice. No, 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 it's not. What palliative care is it's a specialty dedicated to reducing suffering in families that are facing serious illness. So that's reducing physical suffering, reducing emotional suffering. It's specifically about the family. So not even just the patient, but the patient and family. And facing serious illness could include people who are trying to get cured. So if you have a cancer, stage 2 or 3 cancer, you're hoping for a cure, but you are feeling anxious, you're feeling stressed out as a family, you're getting chemo and you're feeling nauseous or fatigued, all of those that are physical and emotional suffering in a person with a serious illness, that's a perfect place for palliative care, even though the person is hoping to be cured. So, anytime someone is facing a serious illness and they're having any emotional or physical distress, which is most of the time if you're facing a serious illness, that's an appropriate place to seek out palliative care.
I love that. Thank you. Because
Sure.
Yes.
I don't have the statistic in front of me, but I know they're high, especially in the United States. When we talk about cancer, when we talk about heart disease, when we talk about diabetes, like all of
Yeah.
those things would fall under that if it's
Correct.
causing stress to the family,
Yep.
right?
Yep. There's 3 buckets really. That's how I think about palliative care. 3 buckets of things that we do. One is symptom management. So pain, fatigue, nausea, constipation, symptom management. Number 2 is coping. So that's coping for the patient or the family, meaning stress, anxiety, depression, etc. And the third is medical decision making. So sometimes people have to decide, should I do that chemo or not? Should I do that surgery or not? Do I want to change my code status? Do I want them to intubate me or not? Do CPR or not? So, all of those decisions, we help with that too. So, any of those things, symptom management, coping, or medical decisions.
So important.
So I have a question
Yes.
because I'm at the stage in my life. Shannon and I are at different ages and stages, right? But I recently noticed, so I'm in my 50s, and I think, I don't know in the medical profession, but I think it was probably about 50 that we started getting asked the question anytime we went somewhere to the hospital or thing, do you have the DNR? Do you have the, so that kind of to me falls under that.
For
And
sure.
when should we be having those discussions?
Wait, can I tell you a funny story? So
Absolutely,
so I
please.
have two daughters. One of them just graduated from college, and she was recently in a class on medical ethics, a big class of like several hundred people. And the professor said, "Raise your hand if you have an advance directive." So several hundred people, 19, 20, 21. She was the only person who raised her hand because her mommy made her have an advance directive because stuff happens. Young people get in car crashes, right? And then some people get in car crashes and they're in a persistent vegetative state. What would she want me to do? I want her to decide what she want me to do, and I want her to write it down and sign her name to it. So I have an advance directive. My husband has one, and so do both of my children. As soon as you're 18 and you would be making your own medical decisions, that's the time you should have an advance directive.
Mm,
I think that's a, thank you so much for that clarity because I
yes.
think, and I don't know if it was just where I was raised or if it's pretty common across the United States, but I think there's a myth about like if we talk about it, it could happen,
A
right?
100%. 100%. We have this weird magical thinking around talking about death or dying or bad things happen. Like if I talk about the fact that my child could have a car crash and be in a persistent vegetative state, that somehow that's going to make it happen. That's not how it works. That's not how it works, right? It could happen whether I talk about it or not. And if I talk about it, that's not going to make it more likely to happen. That's magical thinking. But a lot of us have that. And it's important to notice that in ourselves so we can see like that's not a reason. That kind of crazy magical thinking in our mind is not a reason not to do the things we need to do to make sure that we get the care that we want when if something bad were to happen. And it's like a
Right.
safety net. You do it and then you put it away. It's not like you spend every minute of the day thinking, I have an advance directive. I have an advance directive. You just do it and you put it away and then you go to lunch.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I remember the first time I learned about an advanced directive was in a Toastmasters class and or a meeting, right? And they were talking about it, going through the speech, and it was really enlightening, especially talking about intellectual wellness. It made me think more in the future and say, okay, instead of being reactionary, a lot of things and phases in life and systems that we need, if we think about it, have the conversations and put the details to the side, it can be there for whenever we need to use it or whenever we need to update it.
Exactly. And the thing is, it's not just a form. It's
Yeah.
really supposed to represent who are you and
Mm,
what's important to you. And if you ever couldn't speak for yourself to the medical system, to your doctors, what would you want done to you? If you like, if they, anytime they can ask us, what do we want? We just tell them this is
right.
in case,
You
God
can't talk.
forbid, you can't
Yeah.
talk, you have a car
Right.
crash or, something happens to you. They want to know what would you want? So just as an example, one of the really important questions is, would you want a feeding tube? So let's just say I have a car crash or something happens, I fall off a ladder and I'm in a persistent vegetative state.
Mhm.
And the doctors say they don't think I will ever wake up again.
Right.
Would I want a feeding tube? That means I'm spending the rest of my life in a nursing home, fed through a tube for until I pass from an infection or a bed sore. And the truth is, for me, just
Mhm.
me, I actually wouldn't want that.
Right.
So other people would want that. Some
Mhm.
people want every day on earth they can get, no matter what it looks like.
Mhm.
Other people want to stay on earth if they can engage and recognize their family and have a conversation and drink a cup of coffee or whatever. That's more of
Yes.
the side I fall on. But
Right.
there's no right answer. Everybody's
Mhm.
different. But boy, you want the doctors to treat you the way you want and not the way they would want.
Right?
Absolutely.
Now, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question, but I just want to ask it in case one of our listeners has the same question. Now, you can always change those, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
if you make an advance directive and say you're 30 years down the road and you're like, science has changed or medical, like, and I don't think I either don't think I want that anymore or I think I do want that. So, what is the process for that?
That's such a great question. Absolutely, you can always change it. And the first thing to say is if you can speak, it doesn't even apply. So your advance directive could say one thing, but if you say, no, doctor, I want this, they just listen to you. But if you made an advance directive at one point and then you made a new one, the newest one always counts. So whenever you make a new one, it supersedes all the ones that came before it.
So where do you file that? Like, I'm horrible with paperwork. I'll just be really honest. It's not my strong side. So where does that live?
So I love this question because I feel like a lot of people don't do it in the ideal way. For some reason, this gets done often in people's attorney's office. Like they do a will, and with their will is an advance directive with no medical guidance. No one's saying, hey, you sure you'd want a feeding tube? Like if you were never going to wake up again, you had a terrible stroke and you were never going to wake up again, would you want a feeding tube? That's a medical question, really probably shouldn't happen in the attorney's office, but often it does. So people often have them in their attorney's office with their will. That's the wrong place, in my opinion. So what should happen is you fill out the advance directive, which has two parts, super important, two parts. One is the medical power of attorney, and that is listing someone who you believe would speak for you in the way you would want to the doctor. So that's naming a person. And then the second part is the living will part. And that's the part where you say, if I'm never going to wake up again, here's what I would want. They're together, but they're two separate things. So ideally, that piece of paper gets copied and you keep a copy in your home and you tell the people who love you where it is. And very importantly, you give a copy to your medical power of attorney, because if something were to happen, that's the person that probably they're going to go after. And that person then can produce this document and say, oh, look, here's proof. I'm the medical power of attorney. And this is what the person would want.
So, Shannon, I don't even think I told you this. We always talk about books on this show. Um, Dr. Delia. And on the flight out to Texas, I read Stacey Abrams' latest political thriller, and it
Mm.
had all of this in here. Actually, her
Really?
first one did. Yeah, it was fascinating. And I wasn't even paying attention to that we were going to have this conversation today. But I'm going to pull up and tell y'all the names because it was a legal issue and
Mm.
a political issue in
Mm.
this book. And it's all
Interesting.
fiction, but it was fascinating. So it was from While Justice Sleeps by Stacey Abrams. And I think there was another one that I read in there, but it's her two political thrillers. And it's fascinating because I learn a lot through books, sometimes fiction and
Yeah.
sometimes nonfiction. But she got it right, according to what you said, because they went
Nice.
after the person who had the medical power of attorney who was making the decisions, and they had to produce the document and said, nope. Like it was, so yeah, so fascinating.
That's so great. It's actually a really important concept, particularly for some families, because if you don't have that and you are not able to speak for yourself for whatever reason, there's a legal, excuse me, a legal pathway about who they ask. So your spouse, then adult children, then your parents, living parents, and then your sibling, etc. So let's say, for example, you have a partner to whom you're not married and you don't get along with your family. So that's not your spouse. And if you don't live with them, they may not even see you as a domestic partner. But if you want that person to make your decisions and you don't get along with your family, if you don't have that paper, you know who they're going to ask? Your family.
Well, and I know it's better than ever today, but it's still under attack. Like for our LGBTQ folks, like this is
100%.
a major issue because if you are not recognized as a spouse, you can be ignored. And so this is a big deal. And
100%.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so tell me, I know going through it personally and professionally with folks, this can often be challenging. Like to ask these questions, to have these conversations. Um, let's just take it from a parent perspective, right? Because a lot of people have aging parents that are my age or even younger. How do Oh wait, before I ask this question, Brandy, who's listening, has a question. I know the answer to this in my healthcare system, but curious of Delia's answer about what doctors and insurance companies hold. What about doctors and insurance companies holding this document?
Good question.
Um, this is a good question. Having a copy in your doctor's office is not a bad idea. Probably even more important, though, is having a copy of the document in the hospital where you're most likely to go. Because sometimes you have it in the doctor's office, but you show up in a hospital, they may not call your primary care doctor. They should, ideally, but often it doesn't happen, particularly if there's an emergency. So you could have it in your doctor's office, but then you could go to some other hospital. They don't call your doctor, and then the hospital never gets it. So insurance companies, I don't I don't even know how to answer that. I wouldn't say that's appropriate for insurance companies
Mhm.
to have that document.
That's important. Who okay, so let's say if it's not the doctor I normally go to, and I know I live by a hospital, and that's why I moved to this house or this area, right? Who
Yeah.
would I give it to in the hospital?
You can just give it to medical records actually and ask them to
Mm,
upload it into your medical record.
got it.
Because you know they got all your financial info.
They got all your stuff. I'm glad you said that though. A financial power of attorney and a medical power of attorney are completely different things. People often get that confused. So they'll say, yes, I have a medical power of attorney, and they'll show up with a financial power of attorney document, and it's completely different. It doesn't count.
Well, I love that we're having this conversation before an emergency.
Yeah.
And I think that's where my question was going earlier
Mhm.
is when should we be having these conversations, especially with those of us that have parents that are aging or, we have aunts and uncles, we have I know you said you've already started having it with your kiddos,
Yeah.
but for somebody that
Yesterday.
maybe have
Mm,
never had this conversation with their family, how
right.
would you suggest they even start?
Yeah. What a great question. So you should have the conversation yesterday, today, this week, anytime. The ideal time is before it's an issue. So, of course, sometimes you have to have these conversations when it's an emergency. There's someone had a stroke, you're in the emergency department, the doctor comes in and wants to have this conversation. It's if you have to have the conversation for the first time, then okay, you do it. But boy, is it better to have the conversation long before that when it's not as fraught, right? Like I asked my husband, hey, we're all filling out advanced directives. So here's yours. What would you want? I'm not saying I think you're going to die today. I'm just saying, here, fill out this thing. This is a thing that we should have just in case to be responsible people. And we're going to keep it over here. We tell the kids where they are and that's it. So it's way less fraught when there's not an emergency. So I would say do it soon.
So I think I know the answer to this one, but I'm going to ask you because if somebody's listening and they say, "Oh my gosh, I don't have this," can they go to the internet and find a blank form? Like, where do you start?
Yep, that's just what I would recommend. I would say two options. One is you can Google your state and advance directive because every state has its own kind of state sanctioned advance directive, which is not to say you have to use that one, but it's probably a good idea to use that one. So just Google your state and advance directive, and there will almost certainly be a PDF that you can just print out and fill out. And almost never do they have to be notarized. Usually you just have to have it witnessed by two people who are not listed in the advance directive. So, like, you can't have your medical power of attorney witness it. It has to be somebody else who witnessed it. And it's just to say that, yeah, you were the person who signed that document. So, that's one option. There is a kind of advance directive called a 5 wishes that some people like. I think that one costs a couple dollars and they have a website. I have no connection to that company at all, but it's kind of a nice advance directive. It's a little more whole person and gives you paragraphs where you can write down like who you are and what's important to you and what you want people to remember that is important to you towards the end of life, etc. So I kind of like that one too. But to be honest, for my own family, we just filled out the regular one for my state.
Love all the specific information. I love that. So, what was I going to ask you? Because when I think about why people need information and why I love connecting them to ladies like you as experts, right? Is specifically events like this. And well, excuse me, let me not say events like this, but conversations like this, because my mom being sick and my best friend's mom being sick is part of what's, especially through COVID, showing me, hey, these are the things that we can have in order. Like I was mentioning earlier, that would be a lot easier if we had those conversations, right? So I
Yeah.
know we talked about the difference between hospice and palliative care. Would you mind going into a little more about the physical and mental, the symptom, and then the coping, the different buckets that you said are under that, and how people can use that to make sure that they're being conscious as caretakers?
Sure. So the three buckets that palliative care takes care of are what family members can do. What should
Absolutely.
they think about? Sure.
Yes, thank you.
Sure. So the first one is symptom management. And I think that is incredibly important. And here's why. This is really why palliative care is all about life, ironically, because if you have symptoms and you feel lousy, you don't live your life in the same way, right? Like if you have pain that's uncontrolled and you're nauseous and your constipation, your stomach feels terrible and you can't sleep and you're exhausted, you're not going to play with your grandkids. So
Right.
part of managing symptoms is really so that you can live your life, so that you can be you. That's the
Yeah.
point. And so what I find sometimes is that people are ironically resistant to managing their symptoms. Like, no, I'm okay. I can handle it. And I would encourage people, no, let people manage your symptoms,
Mhm.
because if you feel lousy, you're not going to go for a walk. You're not going to go
Right.
out to lunch with your friends. And all of a sudden your world gets smaller. And that's not
Yes.
good for your psychological wellness either.
No. No, I love the way you put that. Christine, you look like you were gonna jump in. Did you have something?
No, I was just thinking about it. I was thinking about, well, I was raised in Texas,
Yeah.
in the South, and very familiar with that. Oh no, I got
Yeah.
like just what you said, so common about, oh, I can handle this. And
Mhm.
until really like they can't.
Right.
And it's like, okay, yes to managing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking all that through.
Yeah. And the medical decision making, right? So I hear you on the do it before, how did you say it? Do it before it's an issue.
Mhm.
What if we're in the place where it's an issue, right? And you're dealing like mine was again, me and my mom. So you have that dynamic. And it's she had a surgery and immediately after the surgery, she's eating unhealthy food she shouldn't be eating. I'm like, Mom, I don't know about this. And so before I talked to the doctors, I actually decided to leave because I'm not gonna stay watching you eat unhealthy food when you just had surgery. What would you like me to do in this situation? Right. So when it's like that and it is kind of tensious, how would you advise somebody to have those conversations to take the next step?
That's such a great question. That comes up all the time in a
Yeah.
million different ways.
Right.
So there's a couple things in that question, I think. One of them
Yeah.
is, what if your loved one is doing things that you know are unhealthy?
Hmm.
Can you share your opinions with them?
Right.
That's sort of number one to that story. And then
Hmm.
maybe the second part is, what if you've already shared your opinions 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 10 times,
Hmm.
and they won't do it?
Right.
Then what do you do? And I think those are
Right.
actually two separate pieces. So
Great point.
to take the first one, sure, a couple times you can share your wise opinion. Maybe they don't know, maybe they haven't thought about it, maybe, they might want support in whatever healthy behavior you want them to do. So you can share it, I would say max 3 times. And so the first time they might be like, yeah, okay. If you say one more time, they'll be like, okay, so what should I eat then? Maybe the third time they might say, okay, you want to make me a smoothie then? Okay, so then maybe you've made a difference. But once you've said it 3 times, if they haven't changed their behavior or opened themselves to this, what's the chance that number 5, 10, 20, 30 time that they're going to change? It's about 0%. But what will happen is now you have conflict. And if you have a person that you care about who is ill, you really don't want to have conflict, because it's hard enough already. Nobody's bringing their best self because it's hard. And you don't know how much time you have with them. And ideally, you don't want to spend that time in conflict. So there may be times where you have to let it go.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. I'm seeing a question from one of our
Mm,
listeners that I want to make sure to lift up because it looks like a really important one. Eleanor says, my grandson 12 has an undiagnosed illness and is getting pediatric palliative care. Does that mean his condition is life threatening?
mhm,
So, of course, the first caveat I have to say is I can't give medical advice because I don't know the situation.
mhm,
But what I can tell you from an informational point of view is that pediatric palliative care is handled a little bit differently. So, whereas even in In hospice, it's handled differently. In adults, when they are on hospice or have end of life type care, there's an expectation that they can't have it till they're very close to the end of life. For pediatrics, it's not like that. So they start palliative care and even hospice care way, way, way earlier and allow people to have very aggressive care at the same time. So it is handled completely differently. But the one thing I would say is if you have a question, that question is my grandson's condition life threatening? That would be a thing to ask the doctor. That's a really clear, great question to ask the doctor.
Thank you for that. And thanks, Eleanor, for listening and that question. It was a good one. Yeah. So I loved your answer about building relationships because, that's what we're all about.
Let's see.
I don't know
I
if
know
that's
she's
me or
no, I
you
think
guys.
it's her. I know she's got a different setup. Let's see if she comes back.
Okay.
Let's see. She might go out and come back.
We can talk about relationships if that's
Let's do
helpful.
it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that issue of relationships when somebody is facing a serious illness is so important because, as I mentioned before, people, when they're under stress, just human beings, we don't
Mhm.
bring our best self. So, whatever
Right.
were your sticky parts before, they're stickier now. And
Mhm.
so is everybody else's in the family. And whatever your roles were in the family, say siblings, the older bossy one who looks, doesn't respect the youngest one,
Mhm.
those
Yeah,
sorts of things, they will get bigger and deeper and more intense in a difficult situation. And so managing our own stuff is really important for healthy relationships in a family that's facing serious illness.
absolutely.
So sorry, Christine, I lost you for a bit, but I want to
Yeah.
hear the rest of your question.
Yes.
You did. So sorry. My internet, I am traveling, y'all. So my internet is not usually the magnificent internet that it is when I'm at home. I think I don't even know that I've still held my question through that, but what I am going to do is lift up a few comments of our listeners real quick. Brandy Lee says, "Love this insight. This is going to help me circle back to have these types of conversations with my family a little more
Yes.
naturally. I had a similar situation as Shannon with my mom after her back surgery." I
Mhm.
think some of these stories are universal, right?
Yeah.
I think,
Totally.
and I really wanted to lift up when you said about connection, like that connection, that being our best selves, I think is so important.
I
And
agree. And highlighting the connection as the most important thing, I think is really important because sometimes it's tempting to think, making them do the right thing is the most important thing. But once you've said it a couple times, you can't make them do the right thing. So then you switch your focus on purpose to connection. What can I do to make us be more connected?
Yeah. And
well,
what is this comment that Eleanor said about, was it Eleanor that had the comment about her son and her
yes,
grandson and
just a
not
follow
knowing?
up to what she was saying earlier that he's
Yeah.
currently undiagnosed and we have no idea why he's in palliative care. So,
Yeah. So
and
And
I,
Eleanor did state she was late. So, do you want to give the definition again of palliative care? Because that may
mm,
help her.
Sure. So palliative
okay.
care is symptom focused care. So physical and emotional symptom focused care to reduce suffering in families that are facing serious illness. So even if it's undiagnosed, if the physicians feel like there's a serious illness potentially involved, then that would be perfectly appropriate for them to consult palliative care. And it does not necessarily at all mean end of life care.
Yeah. And we talked about it last week. I just went to TEDx and there was a talk about palliative care and the difference between hospice and even hospice and what it does.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't realize until that talk that that's exactly what I thought, right? I said, no, my mom doesn't need to go to hospice. She doesn't need to. And I shut it down
Yeah.
and didn't have the space to have the conversation with the doctors.
Yeah.
And I said, she's okay. This is where we are, right? And so listening to that TEDx talk, I said, did I, of course, Eleanor. I said, did I write off an opportunity for her to be more comfortable? Right. The question is, how would we have paid for it? Which is a whole, another dimension and things that we talk about, but to at least have the conversation and to know that they're not saying, hey, she's gonna, not be here next week, but to make sure she's as comfortable as possible would have been beautiful.
Yeah. And the one thing to say is we only do the best we can do in the situation. right?
Yes.
And so we can't go backwards, but
Of course.
we can go forwards, and we
Yes.
can learn and share knowledge with other people so that they have the knowledge maybe you wish that you had had. And I agree with you that
Yes.
having these conversations is important. And that's part of why I really want to get out here and talk about this, because I
Right.
think that very commonly, it's so common, people say, no, we don't want to talk to palliative care because they
Mm.
feel like that means they're giving up on their loved one, or that
Right.
now somehow they're not going to get good medical care anymore, or we're just throwing them out, none of which is true. But
Right.
a lot of people, even some doctors, really,
Mm.
a lot of people think that. And so it just gives less of an opportunity for the people to be more comfortable, to have the conversations they need to have. And sometimes we put so much energy like trying to squash the scary thoughts into the basement,
Mhm.
that it takes away the beauty and relaxation of the time that we have. And that is one of the benefits actually of talking about it all,
Yes.
is, let's just talk about it. Like, yeah, they said your cancer maybe can't be treated. Let's
Mhm.
talk about it. Let's make the decisions of what you would want. And then let's put that away and let's go play a board game or go watch TV or go for a walk. There's so
Yeah.
much energy spent keeping it away that sometimes it's a relief just to talk about it. And then you don't have to think about it anymore. Let's just go live life.
Yeah. I definitely agree with it.
I love that. It's about healthy communication,
Yeah,
Mhm.
right? It's about those relationship building and healthy communication and being present with what is. Not what we
correct.
wish what is,
Correct.
or like or what's coming, but it's being really present in that moment. I was thinking when you said earlier, especially with folks that are dealing with dementia or things like that,
Mm.
when we go back to that question of trying to get them to change their behavior that may not even be cognitively possible,
Yeah.
right? Especially at the beginning. I know that's so tricky for folks. Um, do things like Alzheimer's and dementia and Parkinson's fall under palliative care?
Sure, absolutely. Because think about how much suffering there is in the family, right?
Right.
So thinking about symptom management, coping in the family about, um, you know, is she safe at home? Is she not safe at home? Do we put her in a facility? How do we have these conversations? What about driving?
Mhm.
All that stuff, tons of coping issues in people with dementia. And then decisions. Who's going to stay home? Am I going to leave my job to stay home with her? Are we going to ask cousin whoever, can they pay for a family caregiver? Are we going to put her in a facility? Like, what on earth are we going to do as a family? Tons and tons of decisions in family spacing dementia.
So if somebody's new to this, if somebody just is like, oh, I'm just entering into this with a relative, a friend, themselves, how do they how do they find you? I know you have a new book coming out that I hope is
I
going to
do.
tell us all this
It
stuff.
is, yes.
Okay, good. Tell us about your new book coming out and tell us like where do we start?
Yeah, it's a great question. That really is why I have pivoted my career to this work. So I help family caregivers of people with serious illness who are feeling overwhelmed and exhausted become confident advocates and then also take care of themselves, because I don't feel like there's a great place for people to go do that. So I do one-to-one consulting, coaching around that. I have a group program, one starting in July, for just this exact thing, because it's not a mystery. There are skills you can learn that make it easier. It's not like it's easy, because it's sad if your person is going through a serious thing, but it doesn't have to be this black hole where we just never talk about it. And then all of a sudden you're facing it and no one has any idea what to do because nobody ever talked about it. There are things that you can learn and skills that you can have that make it easier. Communication skills so you can talk to your family so it doesn't feel so fraught and terrible. And so I think it's important that people just learn the skills and then practice them. And then as a society, we can be better at it.
Yes.
I am so grateful you're doing this work. I was just having this
Mhm.
conversation with a friend the other day because my background is in social work, right? So I've been trained in this.
Yeah.
And it's still hard
Yeah.
going through it personally. But I was literally asking the question the other day. If somebody's not trained in this, like this system is almost impossible.
Yeah.
Um, it is not, especially if you're here in the United States, y'all, it is not an easy system to
Mhm.
navigate when you are
No.
going through the medical system between the finances, all the decision making, the legalese, all of it.
Yeah.
So you are the answer to the question I was
Yes.
asking. Is like how where do people go when they don't know how to do this?
Yeah, come to
So,
me. Come to me, and
right?
hopefully by the end of the year you can read my book. But yeah, I think it's really important, and it just seems to be this hole, and part of it is because as a society we're afraid to talk about these things. And so nobody talks about it till it's an emergency, and then when it's an emergency it feels 100 times worse. If we just learned skills when we weren't in crisis, we would be better able to handle when it is a crisis.
I love that. I love that. And we will make sure, well, first of all, you can tell folks what your website is or how to find you. And we will also make sure it's in our show notes when we get to the end.
Terrific. Thanks. Yeah, you can find me at integrativepalliative.com. And you can reach out through email there. You can sign up for the programs there,
Right.
integrativepalliative.com.
Oh, I
Yes.
love that. I love that.
And we love freebies, and y'all's on her site, there's so many freebies like the Integrative Pain Management Guide, right?
Yeah,
Mm,
10 best ways to help your seriously ill loved one.
that's a good
Got
one. You should download that. That's a good one.
hello. Yes. Guide to helping a loved one make treatment decisions. And then the last freebie that she has posted on this link, adding integrative medicine to your practice.
Right.
So that's for,
For clinicians,
mm,
hello.
doctors, and nurses,
Yes.
nurse
Yes.
practitioners. Yeah.
So they can, yeah, I love that.
But you
Beautiful
could give
listener.
that to your doctor too.
right?
Yes. I like that
Oh, I
idea.
love all these resources.
Yeah.
Here at Women Connecting Wisdom, we're about stories and we're about resources, and you have knocked it out of the park today
Yeah.
because it is like, because I'm the social worker in my family, I am often the one that gets the first call
For
from
sure.
different family members. And so I can't wait to go look at these resources and be like, all right, what else do I need here?
Right.
So, yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I have loved this conversation today.
It's great.
Shannon, do you
Mhm.
have any more questions before we go to our connecting in action?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think I'm ready.
Okay.
So every week we do a wisdom in action based on the dimension that we're talking about. So intellectual wellness. What are you working on for yourself in the next 7 days?
Me? Are you talking about me?
Yes. Yes.
What am I working on for myself? What a great question. I, from an intellectual wellness perspective, I am
Yes.
trying to be clearer in my communication of how I can help people. And that goes in both ways. So I'm talking to people who are facing, family members who are facing serious illness, and trying to understand all the ways that they're struggling so that I best can put together a way to help them.
Mm, I love that.
I want to lift
So,
up Eleanor's question before you ask me
yes.
mine. She says, "Thank
Yes.
you so much for this. It was very comforting." Oh,
Thank
so
you,
glad it
Absolutely.
Eleanor.
was timely, Eleanor.
Yes.
So glad.
Yes, yes. Okay, I hear you on the clear communication. That's mine too. I'm thinking about when you said that, I'm thinking about um how I can help people with Women Connected in Wisdom, right? Your story is I could take the words for myself, take the words out of your mouth and say the same thing for Women Connected in Wisdom and Shalo Glow. When I read Christine's first book, Still Point, and saw that caretaker's immune system is literally in jeopardy when you're taking care of other people, you're
Yeah,
exposed,
yeah.
So I love that you were in the meat of everything working on it. And I feel better on the wellness side and the preventative side where we're still, we have the space to be proactive. So
Yes.
I will say hashtag communicate and be proactive. Or I'll say be proactive. How about that? Boom.
Nice.
What about you,
Love
Christine?
it. Well, because I am caregiving this week and traveling,
Yes.
I am going to focus. My wisdom in action is going to be about some self care. So, self care every day. Um,
Ooh.
Good for you.
that whether it's just a walk outside or it's a long hot shower, or, sometimes when you're in the midst of caregiving, you can lose yourself. And so,
Mhm.
you'll know that's my jam to talk about it in still point and to practice what I preach. So, like, I realized when we got on air, I haven't been outside today, which is
Right.
shocking for me because I usually
Hmm.
start my day outside. So
Hmm.
that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm going to go outside. That's my
I love
Nice.
second
it.
one. Go
Hello.
outside.
I love it. I'll take two. We usually do two. Go outside. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Delia, for coming and sharing your expertise and your wisdom. Thank you again for the work that you're doing for joining us for episode 117.
Thank you so
So
much for
grateful
having
you were
me.
here.
This was great.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon.
I want to lift up Eleanor's wisdom in action. She says, hashtag don't worry, ask the experts. That is
Yes.
a great one, Eleanor. I love
Yes.
it.
Ask Dr. Chiaramonte. Yes, she will help
Right?
you.
Oh my gosh. I feel so much more relaxed in my body after that conversation. I can't
Good.
wait to go to her website and download those resources.
So
And
important.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think y'all, it doesn't matter who you are. When you're going through it, it's big stuff. I call
Yeah.
it next level adulting.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
it's
and
like,
I feel my question is, does it ever end? I feel like it's just if it's not one person, it's the other person, and it's just the question of how close you are to the situation, you know?
well, and I have to say my viewpoint on that is I hope it
Mm,
doesn't end because the reality is when we love and when we're connected, it's a
mm,
part of life
that's a good
is
point.
doing this. And so the
Yeah.
more connections we have, nope, not going to end and I'm here
Mhm.
for it, you know,
That's
because
a good point.
I think the opposite wouldn't make me very happy if I
Yeah.
was living by myself somewhere with
Yeah.
no connections.
Yeah. And I think what I'm thinking about specifically is the because you ladies are sharing the point of view from being in the middle of it, right?
Mhm.
Me and my best friend are 3, 4 years out and we're still dealing with
Right.
stuff. It's still the paperwork is
That's
still
true.
not done. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
I see
So
what you're saying about does it ever end?
right. So
Okay.
I'm thinking about projects, like let's close the tabs, but having the information, knowing that, hey, because I was going to say the lawyer, that's where I have my will, right? But if
Oh,
that's not where everything else is supposed to be, it makes sense for the power of attorney, depending on which situation you're talking
the
about, that
financial,
they have,
yeah.
you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
super grateful to have the conversation. And to anybody who's struggling with caregiving and knowing what to do and the weight of dealing with the situation and trying to learn and do stuff for the first time, like Dr. Caramonte said for me, not beating yourself up. You only know
Right.
what you can know and
Right.
get connected to the expert. She has the freebies that she can help walk you through. And if there's, different places, maybe it's your doctor that you can ask those clear questions to, or even Google. Sometimes for me, I had to realize I didn't know even where the pancreas was, right? I knew that my mom had pancreatic cancer. I didn't realize that I didn't even know exactly where that was. So just starting with the small steps to get to the next step and taking it one
Right.
step at a time, staying connected to source and nature.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. And guys, if you want to do this in community, right? Sometimes having those conversations and the support is difficult to find in your family. This is a benefit that we get from Women Connected in Wisdom. The ladies were there when my mom passed away. And as we see, things continue to happen. Like we said, when we stay connected, it's going to be something that
Mm.
support can help with. So the doors of the community are still open for Women Connected in Wisdom until the 4th. If you are in Atlanta or able to travel, we have people from around the country getting ready to talk to you and share their stories for Volume 1. So we will be at Sweet Auburn at the Spark Lab at 228 Auburn Avenue, Northeast in Atlanta for our last Volume 1 book signing. We're super excited about it from 3
We're
p.m.
going
to
to be
5
there
p.m.
on Sunday.
Did I
Yes.
say Saturday?
You hadn't said no, you
Oh,
just didn't say the date yet.
got you.
So
Hello. What told the time, didn't tell the day. Every day, 3 to 5 on
no,
Sunday, we will be there. June 4th.
I
Yes,
love
thank
it.
you
So
for
y'all
that.
come meet us. Come hang
Yeah,
out with us and meet
have a
some
good
of our
time.
other Women Connecting Wisdom authors. It's gonna be a good day.
It's gonna
Yep.
be a blast. I'm super excited for everybody to get here and for it's always like a party, party and sharing of amazing stories. So thank you
Right.
guys for joining us for Intellectual Wellness. And again, episode 117. We will see you for the wrap of season 13 next week with environmental wellness. In the meantime, be well, be wise, be whole. We'll see you soon. Peace.